Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to discuss the flight to maintenance work as a safety uh, option from the manager's perspective. So this came about, we got some feedback from one of our previous episodes a few back where we had suggested developers take on maintenance work, volunteer for maintenance work as a flight to safety. And I heard from a manager, and she said, wow, that I wouldn't have thought that because to me, maintenance work is almost a punishment. You know, it's a necessary evil. It's not really a punishment, but it's a necessary evil. And if I was to assign a developer to do maintenance work forever, like the idea that the developer would just destroy all the maintenance work and then there would be no maintenance work was totally foreign to her. Instead, she's like, "Oh no, that would just be. There's always this maintenance work. There's always these bugs that are going to be there. And if I assign somebody this, and I set the expectation that like this is yours forever, so make it go away. That was just a totally foreign idea to her, and so I wanted to dive deeper into that.
Just to, I guess, first of all, characterize it. The yours forever part, I definitely wouldn't phrase it that way. Like if we were doing like a flight to safety, I wouldn't be like, this is your job forever. The idea is like it's a temporary flight to safety. It's not like, this is the rest of your life kind of thing. So I could totally see a developer being like, if that's their new life now and they hate that, sure, yeah. But I just wanted to go ahead and before we dive into it, go like that's a strong thing that kind of stuck out to me immediately.
Well, so that's interesting because to me, anytime I take over maintenance work, I volunteer for it because we went into it in that episode, but like to me, volunteering for the maintenance work is a very sure path to safety and power. Power in the influence amongst the organization, not a power in the making people do things. Power, I have the power. And so, to me, and throughout my career, if I take on the maintenance work very quickly goes to zero. Like taking on the idea that there is going to be daily tasks or daily work, bugs that I'm going to have to mitigate, data that I'm going to have to fix because there's a bug. Like that is just so heretical to me that the idea of being assigned to the maintenance work, it's like, oh no, I own this thing. I own it soup to nuts. And I will make sure that there is no maintenance work so that I can do other things. So I guess that's a good place to start of, because it seems like even you and I don't see it the same.
Yeah. Okay.
If you end up taking on maintenance work, like what, if you're on a team and you get rotated into maintenance work for the week, how do you approach that? Before I tell you how I approach it.
Sure. First of all, I guess a question: is maintenance work also considered support work? Like if you have a support rotation, for example.
Yes.
Right.
So support. Well, the support rotation only matters because you have maintenance work. But yes, we're talking about, when I say maintenance work, I mean the bugs come up, issues that you have to investigate and mitigate.
Yeah. So the way I approach that, well, first of all, the thing I do enjoy at companies is when you have a rotation, and that rotation affects from the youngest naive employees to the experienced ones. That way you get this kind of really deep understanding of the actual problems in your system. Like everyone understands the exact pain points. No one's just kind of like gets to escape them. So just kind of wanted to call that out to begin with. But the way I approach it is not necessarily from like, I don't approach it from the concept that if I do enough maintenance work, it will go away. To me, it is like just like a evergreen problem. You will always have some kind of maintenance. But I approach it from the perspective of like, this is essentially the truest form of our software right now. We have all these dreams of like what we want the software to be or what it could be or new products. But what people are actually experiencing every day and the bugs they report and what you get stuck on to go through and try to fix or maintain that's the reality of the system. And I feel like understanding that reality is super important, because
Mm-hmm.
if you can actually solve those problems, you not only solve the customer's problems, but you alleviate the stress from the rest of your team. So their support rotations get easier if you fix outstanding bugs that keep causing more support requests. They're like basically like time suck generators, because each week, some engineers will get pulled off on them. If you fix them,
Yeah.
engineers are happy and the customers are happy. So to me, it's exciting to get put on maintenance work, because you get to see all the issues in your system, and then maybe even like make your own little master plan of like, oh, if I were to, be able to suggest things one day, I would tackle them in this order, because this would
Mm-hmm.
have a cascading effect on like freeing up time in an organization and just making everybody happier.
Yeah, I think one greatly underappreciated thing, developers often say, "Oh, I just want to write pure software." There is no more pure software than hunting down and fixing a bug.
it's the
Like
it's the software being used. Yeah,
right, it's a software
we don't
being
live in a
used.
dream world.
You
Yeah,
are right. It requires you to build a mental model of what's going on, what people did. Like it is the purest expression of software. You are in the software.
yeah.
You can limit yourself to the universe that is the software. And so I have never understood the argument of, oh, I don't want to deal with bugs. I just want to be pure soft. Like I just want to be purely in software. Like that's
I just
bugs
want to
are
write them.
pure. Yeah, I just want to write. I think that's what they really mean. I want to make the bugs. Yeah, I don't want to fix it. That's hard. I got to think about the system then.
I think that
Okay.
it just goes along with, it's just a really human emotion, right? Like even like for example, I'm about to move into a home next week, and there's excitement for moving into that home. And once I get into that, then all the reality is going to hit me that I have to keep track of like all the the AC unit and the water heater failing after X amount of years, and
Mm-hmm.
the seals on the windows are getting kind of old and they need to be replaced in a couple more years. All of that maintenance work is like part of having the good home. Like the home doesn't exist without that. If you could be, oh, I wish I could just live here and never have to worry about any maintenance. Well, congrats. There's a method for that. It's called apartment rentals, and they'll do all that for you. So that's the flip side of it. There's not like a perfect world where you just get to have your cake and eat it too. Like that's the part of it. That the maintenance is keeps the dream alive.
Okay. So I think we've established, or we've mentioned many times, that you and I are odd as developers in that we like the pure maintenance. We like the challenge of a pure project or of a pure bug and the maintenance work. And most developers don't bring the idea of, oh, well, if I'm going to support work, let's go with support, right? Like I'm going to fix all these support problems and then they're not going to be here anymore. And, I'll have such an understanding of how everything works and impacts each other that I will gain influence and power within the company and the organization. And so from a manager's perspective, putting people on support rotations or telling them to do the maintenance work feels like they're like a necessary evil. Like it's a thing that you have to do. It's like, getting your kids to brush their teeth twice a day. As a parent, your kids are going to be like, I don't want to do it. And you're going to be like, well, you got to do you got to do it.
Yeah.
I often have that image in my head when I hear developers being like, I don't want to do support rotations. And, from this conversation with the manager, she had a similar feeling of, oh, it's one of these things that as a manager, I have to push people to do.
Yeah.
And so as, if you're a manager and you're pushing people to do support work and they're looking at it as a drag and you're looking at it as a drag, that's a bad sign. Like that's a sign that your team, your organization is you're writing bad code. Like that, there's no other way to describe it other than you're writing bad code and you're not fixing it. And much like anything else that you have a problem with and you don't address, it's going to continue to be bad.
Yeah.
And the fact that people don't want to do it is a sign that you're not addressing it. And it's a sign that you are covering over, you're mitigating problems, you're not fixing them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for if you're a manager and people are pushing back, you need to have a almost a retro every week.
Yeah,
Gather all the incidents that happen, all the support tickets that these developers had to do, and make sure that they actually fixed them, not mitigated, or if they couldn't find it, right? Like, hey, this crazy thing happened, and then we had to rebuild this database table, and then it was fine, but we don't know what set
yeah,
off this whole thing.
right.
Okay, fine. Keep that open and keep coming, like not keep coming back to it, but like keep it in the top of mind. Like, hey, this is something happened and this happened, and sooner or later it's going to happen again, right? As a
Right.
manager, start picking up those project management chops of, okay, you are the manager. You're now responsible for ensuring that the support stuff gets fixed. And
Yeah.
any support ticket that the developer closes and it didn't, it comes back, that's a discussion. Like, why did it come back? What did we do
Hmm.
that caused it to come back? And you have to start being a driving force. Like if you're in the
Yeah. Well, you're hitting on the theme of accountability, I think.
yeah.
Because you're as a manager, you're making them more accountable for like why was there a regression here?
Mm-hmm.
But I think from the engineer's perspective, you want to be accountable in the way that you're not hurting other people's jobs, so you're not causing others like strife to compound. Basically, like the idea of commit and run, where you commit code and leave on a Friday, and then other people have to pick up your pieces because you're on vacation or something,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't know how to do that. So is that same kind of I don't want to be that kind of a dick to my teammates is the same kind of like feeling really you should have when you think about, oh, that bug's back again, we should do it the right way, because otherwise I know John is going to be on rotation next week and he's going to have to suffer the exact same thing and have to train him through that. Let's just do it the right way. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that's kind of that's at least the theme that really resonates with me when it comes to that. I think a lot of times whenever I'm working with teams at my current job, people want to work on that maintenance work because everyone on the team looks at each other when they hear that bug, like, "Oh God, we got to deal with that thing again," but we don't have
Yeah.
time, and we're dealing with this. And then once it's finally fixed, almost every single time, everyone's like, "Ah, oh, finally, someone fixed the issue. Thank God, I was so sick of dealing with that every single time." And there's like a relief. So
Mm-hmm.
again, it's a good thing, and I think accountability. Maybe I don't want to be like too much of a finger wagging at people like you should be more accountable, but I feel like there is a little bit of a theme there. Like you should want to really make your teammates' lives better and establish that culture because they generally will reciprocate and they want to make your lives better too. So you'll have just a better team all around if you focus on making problems easier.
I think that's a great way to put it. As a manager, part of your job is the culture and creating that culture of
Yeah.
accountability or just evangelizing the idea that, hey, if we don't fix these things and they come back and this thing comes back week after week and we mitigate it week after week, then we're hurting ourselves and we're hurting each other. And we should evangelize that and bring it together. One thing, uh, as an example from my past, I had worked with a developer, good developer, but he was the king of mitigating and never fixing. And he had
Duct tape.
scripts, he had processes, and
Yeah, yeah.
he would complain that he could never make any progress because he spent half his time dealing with issues. And literally, like, an issue would come in, and he'd be like, oh, he'd look at his run book, and he would spend 20 minutes running the scripts to fix the issue. And the issue would have gone away, like the data corruption would go away. And he would spend like 4 hours a day doing this. And I was like, why don't you just
Jeez.
fix the underlying issues and then stop mitigating things? He's like, well, I don't have time to do that. I'm too busy mitigating.
That's a great catch 22 right there.
Great catch
uh,
22.
mm. So yeah, I think having them, just take a beat for a moment. I feel like I mentioned this in a recent, oh well, maybe more than recent at this time episode, but I at one time just shadowed how a couple of people at my company were working and dealing with processes, and then I saw them doing similar things where like they had
Mm-hmm.
scripts to fix things, or they just did really a bunch of manual stuff, and I'm like, are you just doing it this way every day? And they're like, yeah, it's a lot of work. It takes up most of my day, and I'm like, I could probably automate that, we could write an internal tool to do that too, to make it easier. And I would do that. And they're like, oh my God, that saves me so much time. But they never think they never think to escape it, because once you're in that cycle, it can be really hard to realize that you're in a loop. You're stuck in the loop. You need an outside view for someone to tell you, hey, you're running in circles, because it just feels normal to you at that point. So it might not even be in there. They're not stupid for it. You just get lost in it, right? So you can just have, if you can have other people like look at it and pull you out of that, and you go, I'm spending 4 hours a day mitigating.
That's a great.
It would take me 8 hours to fix it.
That is a great call out. And managers, again, you can add this outside perspective. You should not be mitigating things. And when you're in it, you can lose sight of you lose the forest for the trees. But as a developer, if you've mitigated a problem, the rule of 3, if you've mitigated a problem twice, there's something wrong.
Yeah.
Right? You really need to fix it that third time. And managers, part of what you should be doing is adding that perspective of, look, we've mitigated this. I've seen this ticket before. We've mitigated this before. Yeah. Let's fix it. Because yes, mitigating this is going to take 30 minutes, and fixing it might take a day or two. But having this thing as a reoccurring, people greatly underestimate just how deflating and what's the word I'm looking for? Motivationally killing having to fix and mitigate the same bug. I know if I see something come through and I'm just like, oh.
Well, also there's an inherent understanding that you're kind of adding to, it's like the credit card debt, tech debt thing, right? Where every time you kick the can down the road, when you're not fixing something, you're adding a little bit of more debt essentially on the system. And some people kind of know it subconsciously, because they can feel it. And it's like swiping the credit card again over and over and over. And after a while, you do feel that pain of there's so much stuff over here we have to do. We don't have any time to do it. And you're stuck in I can't pay down this debt. I've accumulated too much of it. And there's always this careful trade-off in startups, companies, of when to tackle the debt and when the debt is okay, where we're willing to take on that much debt. That turning point is what you're describing, where you're like, I don't have enough time because there's so many bugs coming in to fix all the things that I took out debt for, or took out money for, basically.
Yeah.
So that's when it really hits you. And maybe that's just a good reflection point.
Yeah. So to bring it all back together, I think what we're saying is, for managers, maintenance and support work is not a punishment. Or if people are viewing it as a punishment, it's your job as a manager to help change that culture. You should view it as a way to empower people and also to be a hero. As much as I hate the idea of people being heroes, it is a way to be a mensch and do good deeds for your fellow coworkers. When you fix bugs so that they don't come back, at the very least, you are helping your customers and you are helping your support people.
Right. Yeah. And that's a huge impact. And that's something too, that's the power you mentioned there. It's visible in both your team in a small scope and, depending on what you fixed and the problem that you've solved for customers, it could be very visible to leadership too. If it's, you get a lot of people coming back saying, thank you so much for finally fixing this thing. It's saved me so much time every week now that your product's working like you said it would be working.
Right. The second thing is, if nothing else, apply the rule of 3. The third time you see the same issue come in, make sure that developers aren't mitigating it, but they're actually fixing it. That isn't exactly the rule of 3, but for managers, close enough. And just changing your culture so that, and I guess internalize the idea that if you actually are proactive and attack your maintenance and support burdens, they will go away. And you will discover that you have so much more, not free time, but you'll have so much more developer time and you'll get so much more done. In fact, you might have enough time freed up to work on that internal tool finally that you needed to make it even better in other areas, or just go ahead and get ahead of other issues. So, you'll find that your developers are full of ideas to smooth out the process. And this is the core of go slow to go fast. All of a sudden, having fixed all your support and maintenance things, they will also understand the process. And all of a sudden, they'll start working on tools and things that people didn't know that they needed. Right? People can't
Right.
see the forest for the trees. They accept the system, even though the system it's your system. There's no it's not some external force like gravity where you can't really impact the system and you have to deal with it. The system is the system that you wrote the system. You can change it.
Hmm.
Awesome. Should we leave it there?
Think so. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.